Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. Today, we are sitting down with a candidate running to represent Illinois' 13th district. And it is not the incumbent. We will be sitting down with Dylan Blaha, who is running against incumbent Nikki Budzinski. I first found Dylan because my mother found him on social media and was obsessed with his videos, and I loved everything that he stood for, the whole social media strategy that he had, the just clear and concise communication from him. So I reached out to him because I think what he's doing is an incredible thing, and he deserves all the support that he can get. And if you live in Illinois' 13th district, this should be a very enlightening conversation that will hopefully push you in Dylan's direction. Dylan Blaha is a U.S. Army veteran and former university cancer researcher running for Congress in Illinois' 13th district to get big money out of politics and fight for the working class. Dylan graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Molecular and Cellular Biology. After several years studying cancer immunotherapies as a research technician and graduate student at UIUC, he graduated with a Master of Science in Biochemistry. Dylan enlisted in the Illinois Army National Guard as a combat medic in 2012 and commissioned as an Army officer in 2016 through the Reserve Officer Training Corps at UIUC. He served on active duty for over 5 years, including a deployment to Afghanistan from 2019 to 2020 as a battalion medical operations officer for the 1st Battalion, 178th Infantry Regiment. Dylan also served on the Illinois National Guard Joint Staff as the lead medical planner to support COVID-19 pandemic response operations. He then served a 3-year tour at U.S. Army Europe and Africa and Germany to support both Ukraine and NATO following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Dylan ultimately decided to run for office because he believes America's elected representatives are out of touch and don't represent the interests of the people. He believes it's past time for Americans to be represented by candidates who fight for their constituents. Dylan strives to work with other representatives to overturn Citizens United and eliminate big money's influence in politics. He believes in democracy, freedom, opportunity, and equality for all Americans. He believes in providing healthcare and education systems that won't leave Americans in debt. He believes everyone should be able to afford life's necessities and have plenty of money left over. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Dylan Blaha. Dylan, thank you so much for coming on. It is so great to have you.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Of course. So I'm wondering if we could start a little bit with your background. You previously served over a decade in the Army and also worked as a biochemist. How do those experiences shape the way that you approach politics and also public service in general?
Yeah, so I officially raised my right hand because I couldn't afford to go to college, but I stayed in the Army, joined ROTC, and became an officer because I fell in love with the idea of public service and protecting the American people. I believe my experience in the Army gave me the tools to be a great leader and strategic planner, while my time in cancer research taught me how to rapidly filter and analyze critical information in order to make timely decisions. You know, all the research papers you have to digest just to write your own paper, that kind of thing.
So what was the turning point that made you be like, oh shit, like I have to run, I have to toss my hat in the ring?
Well, some may find it naive, but I believe one person has the power to change many things, if not the entire world. And I'm tired of the massive wealth inequality in our country, and I'm tired of how both parties defend a system that isn't working for working people. I ultimately decided to run against Representative Budzinski, who is an incumbent Democrat, because I disagreed with her votes on immigration, the LGBTQIA plus community, and her unwavering support to Israel's genocide in Gaza. But I'm not just running against her, I'm running against kind of what the Democratic establishment stands for right now, which is not working for working people.
Right. Well, and I don't like the system where you, like, quote unquote, can't challenge an incumbent. Like, if you genuinely think that you are the best person to perform that job for your community, of course you should be able to throw your hat in the ring and fight the good fight.
Yeah, and that's something that's been hard, certainly, because I think the way the establishment operates is it could be the quote unquote worst Democrat in America, and they will still get angry if you challenge that person, which is crazy because every time you do a primary, people are going to naturally try harder. I mean, I hope that people try to primary me when I'm in office,
Right.
that kind of thing.
Right.
I'm on
Right. And
record
that's
saying that. So
right. Well, that's just, I feel like the way democracy should work. You should
yeah,
challenge the people that are in power.
exactly.
So, as you mentioned, you are running against an incumbent. That is a little bit unusual,
Mhm.
as we just said. Why did you feel it was important to enter this race against somebody that generally has a record in the community?
Yeah, I think it is more of the national movement as a whole, right? So even David Hogg earlier, before he got kicked off the DNC, had said, "Hey, we should primary challenge, some of these sleeping Democrats." And I believe ultimately that Donald Trump is a symptom of a greater problem in America. This techno-fascist rise that's happening right now is kind of in part because of the fact that we've had this oligarchy in America. We've had massive wealth inequality, and it just continues to get worse for working people. The top 1%
Right.
owns 93% of the wealth. And unfortunately, I believe that Democrats continue to defend the status quo, and they've lost ground on so many issues over the years because of it. There's a reason why behind closed doors, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it later, they'll say, "Oh, the healthcare system is so jacked up," but they won't say Medicare for all, and there's a reason for that. It's because of who they take money from. And so it's an indictment on the entire system and the fact that they answer to corporations and to billionaires and not to their constituents anymore. There's no real accountability in both parties.
Right. And I just recorded an episode with Bushra Amawala. I don't know if you know
Oh,
who she
nice.
is, but she's
Yeah, I know
running at
Bushra.
Illinois 9.
Mhm.
And she said something that really struck me and has kind of opened my eyes to be just looking at what candidates are saying, where they'll take on the progressive label. They'll
Mhm.
take on, I'm the progressive one in this race, but then they won't call for Medicare for all because of the money that they're taking. And
Yep.
now am very conscious about okay, who's labeling themselves as a progressive or as a, whatever it is versus what are the policies they are actually espousing with that label? And does
Yeah.
that match up with what we consider that label to be?
No, and I think unfortunately there's a lot where it comes with money, because I think a lot of people, you use Israel Palestine for example, and a lot of people will acknowledge that it's a genocide when I talk to them, but when I see what they post online, the statements they make, it is a little weak, and so I wonder, well, is it because you're afraid of the AIPAC money that could flow into your race, and so there's also that bit where AIPAC is also willing to spend an enormous amount of money on races to make sure that pro-Palestinian candidates don't get into office. So yeah, I mean, I would like to think that people see how Elon Musk spent over $270 million to get Donald Trump elected, and they could be like, oh, that doesn't seem right. But even, yesterday I said, hey, Nikki Budzinski, she's received almost $600,000 from pro-crypto PACs, which is why she's made a bunch of pro-crypto votes that actually align with the Republican Party. So somebody in, Madison County Dems goes, oh, well, that's impossible. No one can give that much money in a race. And I was like, do you not understand Citizens United and what super PACs are? So I just don't think a lot of people are aware that this is going on.
Right. Well, my whole pet theory was that because as I've been looking at candidates that are running in 2026, a lot of them do have money in politics as one of their driving issues that they're trying to change. And my theory on this, it's not a fact, is that Elon Musk kind of exposed that this was going on because it was so blatant, because it was so brazen, because he got on the airwaves and openly spoke about how he was giving millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's drawn a lot of attention and made the issue a little bit more in the open. But people, as you said, still don't understand how deep this goes. And it is deep. Everyone, I don't want to say everyone, most people that are sitting in office are receiving some sort of check from somebody.
Yep.
And because of that, it's affecting their votes.
No, exactly. And even then, I mean, I heard, so Nikki wasn't challenged in the last race by a Democrat. She ran unopposed, but there was a Green Party candidate who ran against her in Illinois where I would need a little bit less than 1,000 signatures. If I wanted to run as an independent or a Green Party candidate, you need over 16,000 signatures. Well, because one of her high dollar donors didn't like the fact that a radical left candidate was running in the race, he made her sue the Green Party candidate to try or kick her off the ballot. I mean, and so even in that way, it's like, I mean, if you're that beholden to one person over your actual constituents, and even then, this candidate did at least get all the signatures. She still somehow didn't make it on the ballot. Illinois didn't put her on the ballot. And like 1% of people overall still wrote her in. So, I mean, clearly this is something that, yeah, it just doesn't really seem like the will of the people is working in this case.
Right.
But, I mean, I still have to worry about getting kicked off the ballot. So that's why with 1,000, I need 957 signatures, and we're aiming to get at least 3,000 because we know that she will sue us and try to find a way to kick us off the ballot, because that's democracy in 2025.
Of course. Great. Little off the cuff with this question, but the argument goes that if you're not taking PAC money, you are beholden to the people that put you in office. You don't have to listen to the PACs that gave you money. Mm-hmm. How do you think that is successfully implemented? Like, is that implemented by hosting town halls and genuinely getting the opinion of the people that put you in office and voting their conscience? Like, how do you see that going in practice?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different strategies that I've heard, right? So there's an organization that I was endorsed by called Oath of Office, and they say that they've analyzed politicians who were considered unprimaryable from even in the early 1900s. And the one thing that they found in both parties was that these politicians, they listened to the will of the constituents, and they found ways, like you said, either town halls or something like that. I do think it's a mix of town halls, but also in person and virtual. Especially, I mean, our district is super gerrymandered. It goes from Champaign-Urbana to Springfield to East St. Louis. It's
when
very
I looked
misshapen.
that district up on a map, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Seeing
Mm-hmm.
the way it like curves around, I was like, what is going on? Like, this is such a clearly gerrymandered district.
Yeah, and so IL13, I think it's IL17 with Sorensen, they were made in a way that they're about 60-40 blue. I know ours is about 58 to 42, 59, 41, something like that. And so you can have more, it's a safe blue district. And also, I mean, lately I hear a lot of people thinking that moderate Democrats are the best people to run in even a 50-50 district. And I say, well, I mean, but populist policies are popular across both parties, Right. I mean, the Republicans just run on fake populism, but they've at least tapped into that. They know that people are struggling and that, they need change. But Donald Trump runs on no tax on tips, and then, gotcha, it's actually not what he said it was going to be.
Really? You don't say.
Yeah, exactly.
So you touched on this a little bit already, but what do you think voters in Illinois' 13th district are not currently getting from Representative Budzinski's leadership that you could provide?
Mm-hmm. I don't believe Representative Budzinski represents me, and I believe many of my fellow constituents would agree. She sits on the Veterans and Agriculture committees, but we're not even seeing results here. Many of her stances on biofuel and carbon capture help big ag companies far more than they help small farmers. And I know firsthand her lack of support for our veteran community. I, had an issue with my disability and just had to escalate it to Senator Durbin and Senator Duckworth because I received nothing back, even personally when I reached out to her office. But that's something common that I've heard across the board. And just in general, she doesn't make herself available for normal people. And our local community, Palestinian protesters, for example, even with her hard line on Israel, the thing that's really disappointing is that when she sees anyone wearing a hijab walk up to her, she calls the police on them. And I'm sure it's probably some of the same way with some of the negative votes she's had on immigration, like with the Lake and Riley Act, the Agent Raul Gonzalez Act, and then, she voted to thank ICE. Like, I'm sure there's also members, there's plenty of members in our immigrant communities and immigration leaders were very upset with her. And yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she would do the same thing. Like, it's just, if you're not listening to the will of the people, then it doesn't work. Oh, kind of going back to like how I would do that differently. One thing that we've talked about is kind of doing a membership type thing where, maybe there's a free version, and also because we're grassroots and we don't take money from corporations, something where maybe it's, people pay based on a tier or whatever of how much they can provide, but with that membership as part of the campaign, they get access to be able to vent to me like once a month in a town hall setting and stuff like that. So I don't know, things that we're playing with, because yeah, I do recognize that right now people don't feel like they're being heard on a lot of issues. I think worldwide people feel like they're not being heard on the issue of Israel Palestine. So yeah, any way that we can work to enable that would be amazing.
One of the things that you just said that just really hurts my heart is her not helping constituents with casework. Like that, I interned at Senator Durbin's office and worked on casework virtually the entire time that I was working there. And that really is the backbone of keeping people in office. Like, and first of all, a lot of people do not know that you can contact your representatives and your senators and they can help you out with issues pertaining to the federal government. A lot of people don't know that option exists. So when people do find out that option exists and they reach out to you, you should want to do everything in your power to make sure that the constituent that has specifically reached out to you and your office for help is getting what they need. Like, that is sad that she seems to be shirking her responsibilities. Like, I'm pretty sure that's in the job description.
No, I agree. And I hope, I'm just hearing the exceptional stories, but I've heard a lot of
those
them.
People are always going to be the loudest.
Yeah, exactly. But, based on what I've heard in person, what I've heard from people who have reached out to me. And I think part of it is, as leaders, I think, one, you have a responsibility to speak out on a lot of different issues.
Absolutely.
Just because it gives more people courage to speak up. But also as a leader, there's a lot of influence that comes with a job like being a congressional representative. And so you need to use that to, for example, it's not just enough to get money for the district. You should make sure that you talk to local leaders and make sure it's actually allocated in a way that is fair to all people. If I get money for the district and it's just all invested in beautifying the downtown area, that's great for maybe improving tourism, but does that help working people?
So we talked a little bit about, the challenges to challenging an incumbent. How do you respond to concerns that challenging somebody that is an incumbent could divide Democrats and give Republicans a bit of an opening?
Yeah, I've definitely heard that. I believe the Democratic establishment continues to defend the status quo when the status quo is not working for working people. And so that's why I feel like my message does resonate across both parties. Prices continue to rise, wages don't. I believe the best path forward is an economic populist message that goes with taxing billionaires, ending corporate tax loopholes, increasing wages, providing universal health care, and starting to decrease that wealth gap in our country. And so to all those people, I say, what is more bipartisan than affordability? The first time that Bernie won, I mean, he's won in against the GOP incumbent. And so I think there's just this misconception that, we can only run a progressive candidate if, or a further left than moderate candidate if it's a safe blue district, which one, I mean, we're in a safe blue district anyway. But even if we weren't, I would still say our policies are what will resonate with both parties. There's a lot of people that are just tired of the system. And so if a politician runs on defending the status quo, it just doesn't work anymore.
Right. I think, there's lots of people that are sick of the status quo. And I, think you're right to challenge it, even if powers that be that sit above you don't think so. It's a valiant fight to be on.
No, exactly. And there's definitely there's an age gap there. If you look at Zohran Mamdani, You can kind of see that too with the way that his votes were laid out. I'm 32. I only own a house because I was able to put zero down with a VA loan. It's very difficult for people, especially depending on what job industry they work in, to get a home that are my age. And a lot of young adults that are coming out of college right now, they are planning to go live back with their parents because the job market is horrible and how the housing market is so incredibly expensive. Rent keeps going up. And so I think a lot of young people get that, and they realize that, hey, we were kind of sold this lie where you go to college, you'll get a job and you'll have a house and you'll have everything you ever wanted. And it isn't that way anymore. But unfortunately, I do think that there is the older establishment Democrats, it's either that they don't get it or they're worried that like somehow we're coming after their retirement or something. I've heard that too, where I just want to make sure that my retirement is good. And I'm like, I just want to make sure everyone has enough to live,
Right.
And lives comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like in the general population, beyond just establishment Democrats, I'm 26. I live in my mother's home because I don't feel like I could afford an apartment on my own. And
Mhm.
I'm fine with it. She's fine with it. But when people will ask, like, oh, like, where are you living? And I'm like, oh, in Glenview. And they'll say, like, oh, do you rent there? But I'm like, no, like, I live with my mother. It's very
Mhm.
interesting to see the reaction based on how old the person is. Because when it's somebody that's around my age, they're like, oh, like, soak it in. But when it's someone
Mhm.
older, the reaction is always, well, are you going to move to the city soon? Like,
Yeah.
there is just a very
Mhm.
big disconnect in terms of like what I'm saying. Like when I'm saying to younger people, I don't feel like I can afford to live in the city by myself, they're like, yeah, no, absolutely. When I tell an older person that, they're
Mhm.
like, what do you mean?
Mhm.
Like, well, you haven't lived in the city for 20 years. It was much cheaper back then.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And it's not just in America. I mean, this is a problem around the
Right.
world. With between private equity companies like BlackRock, just buying everything up. I mean, the housing market is an enormous problem that we need
Yeah.
to solve.
So let's move on to some of your policies and your platform. We talked a
Mhm.
little bit about it already, but you have made getting big money out of politics a central issue. What would
Mhm.
real reform look like should you get into office?
So I do think it starts with overturning Citizens United and eliminating the unlimited flow of money that pours into our elections, especially by super PACs, like we talked about earlier. It is insane to think that money can buy you an election, and it did many times in the 2024 election. But it's not just Elon Musk. I think there's like 26 billionaires that put a crazy amount of money into the election. I don't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but a disgusting amount, let's just say. And so, what I would eventually like to get to is like other countries have it, to where why don't we level the playing field and we either say that, hey, elections are publicly funded and they're shorter election cycles. And so you only have, 60, 90 days to campaign, things like that. Because it is ridiculous that if you get elected to the House of Representatives, you start campaigning the very next day for the next election. And so, all of these representatives, even the ones that take corporate donations, spend about 20 hours of their week at least doing call time, which is calling rich people and asking them for money. And it's something that's unfortunately a huge part of being a grassroots candidate too, because we're not taking corporate donations. But it's just like it's a system that isn't responsive. So that's where I would like to get to eventually. But I'm also, a proponent of things like term limits too, because I,
I
I
feel
do
like
think
those things
that
go hand in hand.
yeah, because I prefer to not be ageist about it. I mean, some of our representatives and senators are they're past retirement age. Let's just say that. But I think it's more the problem is anyone that's out of touch with the American people shouldn't be in office. And I think that's where the line is drawn for me. And so when you hear things like Rashida Tlaib did an interview with Hassan Piker a couple months ago, and I heard some of it. And at one point she said, some of these representatives, when they hear that people can't afford food, they go, well, can't they just get a loan for that or something? Like they don't get it. And I've heard that from many angles that I mean, and you think about it, somebody like Dick Durbin, who's been in office since 1982, can you really expect him to still be in touch with how normal people live? I think it's
Yeah.
too long.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely. Like,
Mhm.
1982 is how many years ago? 40? 40, close to
43.
45. We're
Yeah.
we're pushing 45. That's a long time to where
Mhm.
your only job is to, and I mean no offense to elected officials, but your only job is to be in DC and legislate. Like,
Yep.
you've got to be some sort of out of touch with like the reason that you were running in the first place. Like,
Mhm.
I couldn't even tell you as a constituent, and you are more than welcome to jump in as his constituent too. What does he stand for besides being like the number 2 Democrat in the Senate? I couldn't tell you.
Yeah. I mean, that is what I say across the board when it comes to the Democratic Party, though. I mean,
Right.
because progressives get criticized for their stances on things like universal health care, but then I'll say, well, what's your favorite moderate Democrat policy? And yeah, that's what I hear. It's nothing.
That's
You know?
that's hilarious. I'm gonna start using that one.
Yeah, I mean, what's your favorite centrist policy? Public-private partnerships? I mean, it's
Right.
insane.
So over the years, there's been a myriad of people that have run on fighting dark money. Where
Mhm.
do you think those candidates have fallen short that like now this is the moment?
I think a lot of it is the fact that it's not just me saying it. You know, it is a lot of people. You know, people are starting to wake up to what APAC is, and some of these other groups that have a lot of influence in our government. And so I think it's just you elect enough people, ideally in both parties, that are running without dark money, without super PAC money, but that's how it starts, right? I mean, because in order to change the Democratic Party, for example, we need to pull enough of them back to a place of sanity that they can't stand on their current stance anymore. It what they stand for becomes indefensible.
Right. So moving on from that, on
Mhm,
healthcare, you
mhm,
openly support Medicare for all, really championing that progressive label.
mhm.
How do you see a path forward for that in a Congress as divided as this one is?
I do think that Medicare for All is one of those issues that's starting to be a lot more bipartisan than it used to be. There was a recent poll, I think it was Pew Research, that did a study, and 70% of Americans, regardless of party, believe that the government should be responsible for providing healthcare because it's getting out of control. And honestly, especially among Democrats, I heard an interview from Maxwell Frost recently on the Majority Report, and he said that, you know, support for Medicare for all is even among representatives in Congress is a lot higher than you'd think because behind closed doors, they say, gosh, this system is not working, you know, and unfortunately, a lot of them take, you know, bribes, money from big pharma, from health insurance companies,
Right.
but it is just it is out of control. And a Medicare for all system, like it's one of those things that one, we can pay for it by actually taxing billionaires, by actually making sure that corporations pay taxes rather than getting paid by the IRS, because that's what happens in a lot of cases with companies like Amazon. And so if we do that, I mean, even in a couple of years, you're already to the point where you're saving money because administration costs are less. Right now, I mean, 33% of healthcare costs in America are administrative. And that's because our health insurance companies fist bump each other during their investment calls when they brag about how many claims they refused. I mean, it's a disgusting system. So I do think that one is an easier one to crack, honestly. I'm hopeful. And it's something that would help small businesses too, you know? I
Oh
mean, they
yeah.
wouldn't be on the hook for providing healthcare. So I believe that will be one of our first wins.
Interesting that you say that because my follow up to that was going to be, do you think this is something that you can attack right out of the gate, or do you think this is something that is one of those, oh, we need to wait and strike later when the iron happens to be hot?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I tell people with a lot of these things that they aren't necessarily, a lot of these programs are like 5-year plans, you know, I mean, Green New Deal, Medicare for all. It is a slow trickle, but we've also seen Donald Trump give over $100 billion to ICE overnight. So I think we've all seen that the government can move faster than it is currently, and that it's done in the past. So I do think, and I'm sure this will come a little bit later. I think the biggest priority for me is limiting the power of corporations and billionaires in politics, but also just over our economy overall. And so we've seen kind of what they're doing with AI and the weaponization of our data. And so those are the things that I am primarily concerned about. And it would be great to impeach Donald Trump immediately, things like that, or at least. But the problem is that he's strengthened the executive branch to a point where essentially what Congress says and what the Supreme Court says doesn't have the same checks and balances that it used to. So, there's concerns, even if we take the House and the Senate, can we impeach him? But I do think also with that, it's just kind of talking about all the hate towards our immigrant communities and the trans community and just the left in general, now that he's completely villainized anyone on the left. They're doing that because they don't want people to pay attention to the fact that billionaires are robbing them blind, and every subscription service that you've had is probably raising their prices. When we go to the grocery store, we put things back because we're like, oh, wow, that's $7 now. I no, thank you. Or we don't buy name brand things. And it's just like the reason that I tell people, rather than spending all that money to pay ICE to rip people from their homes and from the streets, why not fix the system? There's people I know that have been trying to do this the right way for decades, 20, 30 years, and they've spent tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers, and they're still waiting. But unfortunately, they're able to weaponize misinformation and social media to really get people angry about things because they're already just frustrated about their living conditions and their economic struggles anyway.
Right. Well, that's one of the conversations I often find myself in when I'm talking to somebody that is not a Democrat. Is like, what tangibly about your personal life, what tangible thing has been better for you since Donald Trump was elected?
Yep.
And oftentimes I feel like they don't understand the question because they'll be like, well, boys can't play in girls' sports. And I'm like, were you in high school girls' sports? You 40-year-old man? Like, what do you mean? So it is a bit of a messaging thing to try to say, like, we can make your life, your personal day-to-day life, we can make that be better.
Well, and that's where, a lot of these, he hopped on all these podcasts during his election campaign. And so a lot of it's just, he's given them little treats, when he renamed the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Like, that was because some random person, podcaster was like, oh, that'd be so funny, and with the trans women in sports, that all 4 or 8 of them or whatever, I mean, those are things that they know that they can polarize their base when it's really like a non-issue. And
right.
Crime has been going down in America since the early 1990s, and especially lately. And it's kind of crazy in a way because crime also goes down when people's basic needs are met. So you should really just start there, But it's really frustrating that, and part of it is crime sells on the news, and so we have 24-hour news, and it's always showing something that happened and always scaring people in a way, because that's what corporate media does to stay afloat. But yeah, we need to, one of the most important parts of my campaign is building community and educating people. And so we're going to start rather than a misinformation campaign, which the right does really well, we're going to start an information campaign and really try to, break all those myths, bust all those myths that they've been spreading around. But I hope it can gain some traction.
Right. Well, the whole point of this podcast was to arm people with the information that they needed to make educated decisions, to break down stuff by an expert so people could take it and go forth and make the decisions that they needed to make with that information. Like, it's having an educated constituency is probably the most important thing you could possibly do.
No, I agree. Early on, I at least feel like, hey, if you're voting because of certain values, but you at least you're at least educated on the issues. Like that's what I hope people do.
Right.
You know, I mean, I don't want everyone to agree with me. I just like that they're informed. And,
Right.
and that's the thing, you know, when you're a representative in Congress, you try to help as many people as possible. But, you know, if I hurt a few billionaires along the way, so be it.
It's a casualty that I think you could be okay with.
Yeah, monetarily, to be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
So moving on to Israel and Palestine, how do you balance advocating for Palestinian human rights while also addressing concerns from constituents who strongly support Israel?
Yeah. I do think it's unfortunate because Israel has really tried to get American Jews and Jews around the world to have ties to their country. You know, even though Jews have been around for thousands of years and the state of Israel has been around for, 77 or so. And so a lot of that is just really educating people, and a lot of it is also talking to, Jewish leaders in our community. I'm meeting with a group called UC Jews for Ceasefire later this week, and just educating people that being against Zionism and being against what Israel is currently doing, the genocide that they're doing, is not anti-Semitism. Because there is an increased anti-Semitism, there's increased Islamophobia in America, because we see. I think a lot of the Islamophobia really comes from just a lot of systemic racism in our society, but especially post 9/11, there's a lot of like anti-Arab, anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian, even, and that's a crazy thing too. Is I think like people think that Palestinians are all Muslims or all Arabs, but like they're Semitic, like many of them are Christian. Like we're very, we're not very educated on the issues as Americans, but it's important to have those conversations and talk about the history, that a lot of this is ultimately about, more than anything else, it's settler colonialism. There's the Balfour Declaration in 1917. There's the Nakba, the ethnic cleansing campaign of 750,000 Palestinians that occurred in 1948. Like, that's the reality. And there's only one country around the world whose borders are still changing, and it's Israel, because they're continuing to expand every day, not even just in Gaza, but in, the West Bank, with what they're doing there as well. And it's just like, it's hard, because I think a lot of us, we grow up hearing one thing, and you can be for Jews around the world, and you could stand with them and still say, hey, what the government of Israel is doing is not okay.
Right. Absolutely. That's one thing that I feel like has been hard for a lot of people, is recognizing that the government of the country of Israel is not the same thing as Jewish people, Jewish as an identity, Jewish as an ethnicity. Like, those are two totally different things. And it's been a hard conversation to have, frankly. Like, people just don't seem to understand that just because you are against what the country of Israel is doing, that somehow has to mean that you are anti-Semitic. Not a very, worthwhile conversation.
But that's why they do birthright, free trips to Israel. Any Jew around the world can move to Israel for free. They can help you move into a house in the West Bank. And so there's even some people who have the opinion that, Israel might actually like when anti-Semitism happens in other places around the world, because it'll convince more people to come to Israel. But regardless of whether that's true or not, I mean, we need to attack hate speech at home. We need to protect our constituents everywhere in America, but we also need to stop providing military aid, offensive and defensive weapons, to a country that not only is committing a genocide, but is also attacking all of its other neighbors as well.
Right. No, absolutely. So let's move on to another hot button issue: immigration. You have called for making undocumented individuals full members of the country that they call home, and even for abolishing ICE. For you, what would meaningful immigration reform look like, and how would you build support for it in Congress, given how divisive this issue seems to be?
So based on what I've seen, what I've heard, experienced firsthand over the years, the immigration system is broken. Right now in our town, what they're telling people is that it'll be 17 years to citizenship. And if they have a sponsor, it can get cut down to 11. But I know even my linguist in Afghanistan, he had been trying for years to become a citizen. And I was writing some letters to try and speed up the process because he worked for the U.S. government his entire life. And every time that he stepped a foot outside that base, he was risking his life of being killed by the Taliban. And unfortunately, the first time his packet was rejected, and the second time it was still in the middle of the process when Kabul fell. And so he came over as a refugee. But now, because Trump has revoked the status of a ton of different refugees that we brought over, I have no idea where he is. The process is broken, and the solution is not spending hundreds of billions of dollars on this militarized police force that was. People think that ICE has been around forever, but this was created post 9/11 as part of the Department of Homeland Security. And even in the past, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez have called for ICE to be abolished at the time because what they were saying was that this was disproportionately, they were clearly targeting certain communities and not others. And so there was a lot of sexist practices, racist practices, and so that was why initially in 2018, she ran on abolish ICE. Now I think it's abolishing ICE is more mainstream because we see what they're able to do, and now they're able to legally profile people because of that Supreme Court decision. So what I see as meaningful reform for immigration, because it does need to be bipartisan. A lot of it, I think, still comes back to the fact that part of the reason the system is this way is because billionaires like to extort cheap labor, but they need to get over it. I mean, if people want to be American citizens, then we should put them on that path. So there's been things like, hey, self-report. Undocumented immigrants end up paying taxes anyway because it comes out of those paychecks. So let's set them on a path where they get some type of identification number. We know they start paying taxes. That comes with, being a member of our society, and then we set them on a path to citizenship, one that's way more streamlined than it is now. Of the people that they're taking, 72% of them have no criminal record at all, and most of the ones that do, it's something minor like a traffic ticket. Less than 5% of all the immigrants that they're taking are violent criminals, and sometimes that's even hard to judge because they might be a victim of political persecution back in their own country, for example, and so they're just getting a bunch of fake charges added on in order, as they're leaving their country. So no, I think, it's one of those things where, maybe you set it on a pathway where it's a 10-year path to full citizenship, but along the way there's all these checkpoints. You make sure that, and that's where people go, oh, the Democrats are trying to give healthcare to illegal immigrants or whatever, and it's like, no, I mean, if they're a taxpayer and they're paying into our society, then maybe we should set them up with benefits, But it does need to be a system that is bipartisan. So I do think that's something that we're just going to have to, I think a lot of it will be resolved by fighting the oligarchy as well.
Right. I believe the biggest disservice is that there is no clear path to citizenship. And at the very least, I feel like the bipartisan part of that jumps out is that, yes, if there is an immigrant here that has crossed the border illegally and is living here, yes, they should, register. Like, we should know who is in our country. Like, that sounds pretty even keeled. But where I see the Republicans getting lost on this is what happens after that. Like, yes, register, but what happens after that is where I feel like you'd perhaps lose a bit of the Republicans, even though, to me, that seems very even keeled. Like, they should have a very clear, defined, like, next steps. Because what's so infuriating about what's going on now, to me, is that these people are being detained, they're going to court, whatever it is, and there's no answer for what comes next. What's going to happen tomorrow? What's going to happen a week from now? They have court hearings a month from now. You have no idea if you're even going to walk out of that court hearing and go back home. Like, that's the most infuriating part, that we need a set system with rules and like a flow chart of like, if this happens, then you go here. Like, somebody needs to create that, is all I'm going to say.
Yeah. And there's honor in immigration. America
Right.
is a country built by immigrants. And so, we need to recognize that. And unfortunately, I think a lot of it is, it's that othering that we talked about earlier. People are mad and they want somebody to blame. And so they blame immigrants. They blame trans people. Now they just blame the left in general because that's why they don't have money, apparently. And so, but at a bipartisan level, it is hard. I mean, I've heard some things like, a lot of Republicans are worried that all those votes when they become citizens are going to go to the Democrats. And it's like, I mean, first of all, like, no, they won't. We see that everywhere. But two, I mean, if that's your biggest concern, then fine. They can't vote for the first 10 years. Is that, like, whatever.
Well,
I mean,
like you can build more like stipulations into that.
Yeah,
like there's,
but like, let's make sure people feel safe.
Right. Like if the issue you're trying to solve is like, what do we do with the undocumented immigrants in our country? Like that's a very humane approach. Like you can't just, I mean, who knows if this is even not legal because Donald Trump seems to keep doing it, but you can't just take an illegal immigrant and ship them across the world to some other third country. Like what about that is humane? Nothing, in my opinion.
No, I mean, I haven't looked up if it violates international law, but it seems like it probably does,
That's what I mean. I'm like, it seems illegal, but nobody seems to have told him that. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
So, we're going to wrap up a little bit now. You've described yourself as anti-oligarchy and anti-authoritarian. What does that look like in practice for you and how you would legislate?
So, first of all, I will always put working families ahead of billionaires. There's pieces of legislation that Democrats passed in 2023, for example, and the American Families Act or something like that. That was a good example of one. And for every $1 of tax break that American families got, corporations got $3. That's insane. And that's in a Democratic-led administration. So, I mean, like I said, I want to shackle corporations. I want to make sure that the innovation that comes with AI doesn't come at the cost of humanity. It doesn't come at the cost of jobs and our livelihood. And as far as anti-authoritarian, I do think that a lot of it comes from just fighting back against misinformation. Our education system has been faltering in America for several decades. And a lot of it's because teachers don't have resources. Teachers are undervalued in our society. Education as a whole is undervalued. I mean, since I've been running, some right-wing people make fun of the fact that I have a master's degree as if that's something to be embarrassed about. I mean, so I think a lot of it is just, we need a new set of values moving forward in order to get past this. Because I want to be proud to be an American again someday. And we're not there now. But I do recognize that, when I get elected in 2026, the first struggle is going to be fighting back against Donald Trump and Project 2025, which he's now embraced and said, oh, yeah, that was the plan all along after all this time.
Don't even get me started on that.
Yeah.
As if we couldn't tell from all of the printed authors on the front page being sprinkled throughout his whole administration and whatever. I'm over it at this point.
But we do need to, Democrats need to fight dirty as much as they can. I mean, I think there's certain lines, I don't ever want to weaponize misinformation like they do, which, is an amazing tool if you're a dishonest party and person. But what I do want to do is weaponize facts, and I ultimately believe that gerrymandering shouldn't exist in America. But if they're doing it right now, we do need to fight back with our own. Just things like that. We just need to, throw free healthcare at people. If you don't want it, I don't care. I mean, let's try it. And that's just because at least Donald Trump has shown that the government can work quickly. It's just doing a lot of evil things or things that are, very misguided, even with the tariffs, for example. I mean, So let's move quickly in a positive direction for working people.
So would you categorize yourself as a Michelle Obama, when they go low, we go high? Or are you more of a when they go low, we also go low, if not lower? Which one are you manifesting?
Yeah, I do think that we also go low is,
Okay.
That's a strategy, right? There's just the Democratic Party is the party of status quo. It's the party of compromise.
Right.
And that's got us to this moment we're in right now. I mean, even
Right.
now, my own representative will not say this is authoritarianism. You should be scared.
Right.
A lot of the establishment is saying, vote for me in 2026. We'll get past this. And that is not okay, because we don't even know if we're going to have a free and fair election next year.
Right. Well, that's, for me, going into 2026, I think the biggest misconception and lie that people can possibly be telling the people to vote for them is, once Trump is out, we will fix this.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, well, what do you mean by fix? Because if by fix you mean just taping and gluing all the old pieces back together, I'm sorry, but you're not going to win on that, because
No.
Trump has broken things so much that I think Democrats need to realize that everything's going to need a complete overhaul if and when he's gone, and if we have a free and fair election come 2028.
Yeah, I think people are naturally afraid of the unknown. And I think a lot of establishment Democrats, that 19% approval rating that the Democratic Party has, I think those are people that they think we can just go back to how it was 20 years ago. They have a rosy-eyed picture of how it was for them, and they don't want to give that up. And unfortunately, I think, just in general, regardless of whether you're Democrat or Republican, the system is not working for you. Working people make up the base of both parties, and the government's not working for any of them. So it's just something that people need to realize, that change isn't going to be bad. It's going to be different.
Right.
But in a lot of ways, it will be better. We just have to get there. And I think people are just afraid of that, but we'll get them there.
Right. So last question, getting a little bit hopeful, a little optimistic. If you were to win, what is the first piece of legislation that you would want to introduce or co-sponsor?
I've gone back and forth on this. I've said the impeachment of Donald Trump, but I do think the very first piece of legislation would be to overturn Citizens United and immediately limit the power and influence of corporations and billionaires in our elections. Along with that, though, is just limiting power for corporations and billionaires in general, and so I've talked about things like an AI moratorium. We need to also freeze the rent and do a rent moratorium, kind of like happened during COVID, which is kind of a dirty word still. But yeah, so we need to fight back against the oligarchy, because getting Donald Trump out of office is imperative, but it's not everything.
Right. There's still, so many more things that you could do besides just impeach him, like neuter him. Let's start there.
Take away his power. Yeah.
Right. So that is all I have for you. Do you have anything else that you feel like I might have missed?
No, I think I'm pretty good. I mean, for all those listening, if you want to learn more about my campaign, please visit DylanForIllinois.com. My handle on TikTok and Instagram is Dylan Blaha for Congress. And you can also find me on other platforms as well. You can go through the website and click through. And if you're interested in donating to our campaign, you can click the donate button and go to our ActBlue page.
Love it. I will have all of those linked in the show notes so that everybody has easy access to all of that. Thank you so very much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I just love having all of these candidates come on and really talk about their vision and just what they're all about. It's so interesting to hear kind of what this new reimagined platform for Democrats is. And Dylan is an awesome guy, and his social media always leaves me feeling a little bit more well-informed. So like I said, if you would like to follow him and also be involved in social media, that will be tagged in the show notes. And otherwise, campaign website will be linked in the show notes as well if you would like to donate to it. If you do live in the 13th District of Illinois, I personally would recommend that you vote for him. Nikki Budzinski does not seem to be representing that district very well, and I personally believe that Dylan is somebody that would do amazing things in Congress if given the chance. I will see you guys next week for the final week of Illinois Candidate Month, and then I believe in December we will get back to our regularly scheduled programming, but we will see. It's like I said at the beginning of this month, it's been astounding how many people want to and are willing to come on and talk about their platforms. And unfortunately for me, this is a once a week podcast, and that means that the weeks fill up very quickly. So at least until primary season is done, schedule might look a little odd, but I will keep you guys updated as that changes. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to challenge an incumbent. I will see you guys next week.